All right, hey class. So here's your tutorial on getting set up with some engineering drawings, specifically for our upcycling project. And so to kind of get to this spot, I kind of went ahead and got started, but you'll want to hit this plus button down here. And there's this create drawing. So as soon as you hit create drawing, it'll pull up a menu. I personally, maybe I can show you real quick. So when this pops up, I like ANSI B in inches. I personally did this in inches. And the B size gives you a little more space to work with rather than the A size. Typically, the larger the sizes, the higher letters, right? So if you go with ANSI C or ANSI D, it's even bigger. But ANSI B should be big enough for what we're doing. Typically, you hit OK, but I already got this started. And to kind of show you where we are at, here is, I double click on, this is my mason jar. So my first page should be the item I want to upcycle. And I've got some of my dimensions listed there already, but I'm going to start from scratch here to help you guys get started. Personally, I like to put all my sheets just on one tab. You can do that right here by just clicking insert sheet and it'll pop in a new one. The thing you want to keep track of is everywhere, anytime you start a new sheet, down here, I just double click and I would start put a little title to it. So this would be my other part. This would be kind of my slider that goes into my base, right? So something along those lines. But for this example, I'm going to go in my sheet 2. And the first thing you want to do is actually insert some views. So you click on this button right there. And for this one, I actually want to insert my marble dispenser, and this gives my dispenser base. So when you first click on this, you notice it's kind of small. So I'm going to change mine to 1:1 scale. Depends on what how big your parts are. You might need to mess around with that a little bit. So I'll go ahead and bring my first view in here. And then right after that, once it's selected, the projected views should go ahead and populate. So I'll put in my side view, and I kind of need one more here. So you start with this one and pull it up. That's my top view. And then finally, I'll go ahead and put my isometric in there as well. And stick that in there. So a couple things, I hit escape there to get into select view. Isometric, I like to right click on that, make that shaded view. So put some color in there. Also my isometric, might actually like to make that one a little bit smaller. And so instead of 1:1, maybe I'll do 1:2 on that one, something along those lines. That part's a little bit up to you depending on what you want to do. All right, so more importantly, what we are trying to work on today is dealing with tolerances. And so we talked about last class, 3 different types of tolerances. You either have your bilateral, your unilateral, or your limit. And so I'll show you guys how to put those in. So right now we want to start adding dimensions. So if you want to click on this button right there or hit the letter D as a shortcut. And so what we've done in the past is, let's say, if I'm comparing here to here, that would be the overall height. Typically we put them towards each other, so I can see that the height in mine is 2.5 inches. And then, for example, if I wanted to show the base comes across like this, is 3.5, so on and so forth. All right. The example I'm going to do though is the hole. So typically when we're talking about holes, that's where pieces are supposed to fit into each other. And so that's where you want to make sure you have the right clearance. Or if it's an interference fit, then you have that set up as well. So for my example, I'll keep it simple. I'll just make it this diameter. All right, so let's say this is a hole. Right now it's set up for me, it's a 1-inch diameter hole. And as soon as I click that, you'll notice that I have this little option right there. And so you could either click on it and then it'll pop up. I think if you also double click on the dimension, you should get this menu. Right, and all of the tolerance stuff shows up right here. So the first one I'll show you guys is your symmetrical, and symmetrical tolerance is actually what we refer to as bilateral. So it goes in 2 different directions. And so let's say for me, I'd say this hole, I had some wiggle room, and let's just say it's 0.025. Okay, so that's the tolerance in either direction. So if it's bilateral, let's go ahead and hit enter for this one. And so then bilateral, I see I've got this plus minus. That means it could either be above by 0.025 or it can be below by 0.025 and it'll still function properly. I'll just show you all of these in this case. So the other option, if I use deviation, this one is more like our unilateral. Okay, so oftentimes this means that the hole has to be bigger than this height. So for example, here I might put a 0 on the bottom, and then I leave that as 0.025, or maybe I'll make that one a little bigger. It could be up to 0.05 inches larger. And if I update that, this is my unilateral tolerance. So it has to be at least 1 inch in size, could be a little bigger by 0.05, and it would still function properly. For me, this is kind of where the marble would come out, or the candy, whatever you're doing. So that's could be bigger, but shouldn't be too much smaller. Okay, the last one I'll show you here is your limits. Right, so limits is kind of saying what the lowest and the upper end could be. So from our previous example, you can see that this is kind of taking whatever that number is, and let's go with, maybe it could be 0.02 below, or can be less than that, but it can be greater than by 0.05. So this would be kind of my limits version, limits tolerance. So that's kind of how you would set that up. So you see there's two numbers, meaning the smallest it could be is 0.98, largest it could be is 1.05. So that's kind of how we'll be setting up for your engineering drawings. You'll be doing this for, really you should set up tolerance for anything that would relate to two parts moving compared to each other. So for mine, for example, I also have my slider tab would fit in here. So I would probably also add, let's say my dimension right now is 0.25. Again, we always dimension away from the part itself. Right, so I would probably add dimension to this one. It has to be at least 0.25. This one, most likely for me, I might use a unilateral 0.00 on one end, and then let's say it can be up to 0.02 larger, or something like that. All right, so hopefully that gets you going. Once you have that all set, please take your screenshot or use the snipping tool, include your name so that we know it's yours, and then put it into your assignment. As always, if you reach out if you need help.